It's really difficult to know what's going to happen in the next couple of days. I mean, literally, things are changing by the minute, it seems, throughout the last month or so of this operation, whether it be with the Islamic Republic or with Gaza. There's a number of different factors that can come into play. I think that Secretary Blinken was right in that the offer that has been made, as well as previous offers that have been made to Hamas, have been very, very generous on the part of the IDF. I mean, realistically speaking, no, Hamas wasn't going to release all of the hostages that they kidnapped on October 8th, but they could have avoided all of these casualties if they had. They perhaps could have avoided even a war. I know there are some conspiracies going around about that now, but they are not verified. In fact, many of them have been denied. But that being said, there are ways that Hamas could have handled this better. And I think Secretary Blinken and all the US administration knows that. Despite that, where they differ from Israel is they think that this is something that can be negotiated out of. And I'm not convinced. Personally, I'm not convinced of that at all. I think a lot of the Israeli public is very skeptical, although there is a large faction that very, very much wants a deal to bring these hostages home by pretty much, just short of any means necessary. So we have to continue to do all we can as a state in order to bring those hostages home. But Hamas has rejected deal after deal after deal. As Blinken himself said, they've been changing the goalposts. As soon as Israel is willing to give them what they previously wanted in prior negotiations, then they change their mind again. And I think part of this is that they aren't serious about it, that they never intend to release hostages in the first place. And then on top of that, once they release the hostages, they don't have any leverage. That is why they did this heinous, evil act that they did of kidnapping innocent men, women, and children, because that is their leverage. They are a terrorist organization, and that is how they work. And I don't think that we can depend on being able to make a deal with them, not because of Israel, but because of Hamas. I do think that any Hamas leaders have, a target on their head, regardless of where they are, with or without any kind of ceasefire. And I think that's justified. But beyond that, I wouldn't say that let's say that today Hamas accepts by some miracle of God and hostages come home and Israel has some kind of ceasefire. Um, I think that we've already won, in the sense that the goal here was to disable Hamas from being able to operate and being able to control the Gaza Strip, which they obviously cannot, as of right now, even without taking out those 4 battalions. So I wouldn't say that this is kind of oh, well, we tried, but we couldn't succeed. At the same time, I think the IDF has already been very successful. I think that even once we remove these final, 4 battalions of Hamas, that's not the end. It's unfortunately the beginning, because there are other proxies to deal with. We have the Houthis, we have the Hezbollah, we have many different terror groups across the Middle East that are, created, trained, and funded with the backing of the Islamic Republic. And ultimately, that is the head of the snake. That is the entity that is trying to destroy the state of Israel, not launch a war, not achieve strategic aims, to destroy the state of Israel. That has been their agenda for 45 years now, and that's not going to change. And so, yes, I think we have already been successful. I think we will continue to be successful with Hamas, and I'm hopeful that Gaza can rebuild into something better in the future, although it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of international partnerships as well. But that's not the end. That's only the beginning. And by the way, not just for Israel. This is something that impacts the entire Western world. I mean, the Islamic Republic has been very, very clear since its inception, essentially, that their goal is to destroy what they call the Great Satan, which is the United States. And I think that a lot of the activities that we're seeing now is the result of both Sunni, Qatari, Muslim Brotherhood money being poured into American universities, for example, as well as other projects and communities in the Western world. And then on the flip side of that, you have the Shia extremism going into Europe and the United States, in particular Europe. And that's being funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and where they're pouring money into. So not as much universities, but in communities. And of course, there's massive money laundering operations throughout Europe for the IRGC explicitly, which is part of the reason that Europe has, balked at labeling the IRGC as a terrorist organization. It places legal requirements on the states to deal with these issues. And I think that they haven't been, unfortunately, prepared to do that. But yeah, that being said, we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And when I say we, I don't just mean Israel, I mean the entire democratic Western world. You know, as someone who is not a member of the IDF, I can't say exactly what it's going to be. I could see it going either way, in theory. I also would hesitate to say that, shock and awe means like, indiscriminately bombing. This word has been thrown around a lot since the beginning of the operation. The accusations of Israel indiscriminately bombing. Indiscriminate bombing is what we're seeing from rockets that are lobbed at massive civilian populations. Israel is extremely discriminate. Israel has gone to great lengths beyond pretty much any that I'm aware of, any modern army, in order to prevent civilian casualties, in order to make surgical strikes, in order to be more accurate. And every one of those individual strikes is then independently, by the way, it's not through the chain of command in the IDF, is then independently reviewed by a legal team to determine if that meets the threshold for what is considered proportional under international law. This is not something that's done just, because out of some nationalistic motivation or some desire to destroy Palestinian lives, or even a desire to avenge or to punish the horrible acts that happened against Israel on October 7th. That's not the IDF's goal. That's not why the IDF goes to war. They're there to achieve strategic objectives to disable Hamas from being able to carry out terrorist organizations too, against Israeli civilians. And so even what we've seen so far hasn't been indiscriminate. Now, does that mean that every target has been hit exactly as they wanted? Does that mean that there haven't been civilian casualties, which are an unfortunate and a very, very sad part of war? Of course not. It's a war, and awful, awful things happen in war on both sides, by the way. And I feel pain for every single Palestinian family that does have innocent civilians who have been killed in this operation. But none of that makes Israel, indiscriminately bombing Palestinian civilians or indiscriminately attacking hospitals or mosques or whatever else is unfortunately being used by Hamas terrorists, as we know from the evidence that the IDF has gotten in the operations they've already conducted. So I'm certain that whatever operation takes place in Rafah will take, those objectives into consideration. Nobody wants, even Israelis, nobody wants to see innocent Palestinians die. And I'm certain and confident that the IDF will do all that they can in order to avoid civilian casualties. At the same time, we also have to remember that when we're talking about dealing with Hamas, especially dealing with senior Hamas leadership, the cynicism against their own people is really despicable. I mean, it's unlike almost anything that I've seen in my life. And when I say almost, I'm referring only to, of course, their sponsor, the Islamic Republic of Iran, who does similar tactics against their own people when shutting down, protests or any kind of opposition to their views. What we see Hamas doing and Hamas leaders doing, hiding underground for 6 months while the people of Gaza suffer, stealing aid from innocent Palestinians, even shooting Palestinians who are adhering to the directions of the IDF, trying to get them out of harm's way. So this is a consistent pattern we've seen since, the IDF got involved in responding to what happened on October 7th. And I'm certain that Hamas will do all that they can in order to maximize civilian injury and damage and casualties when it comes to getting these terrorists out of the tunnels and to fight against Israel like actual men, instead of like the cowards that they are, hiding under the innocent Palestinian people who are above ground with no resources that they're taking from them, whether it be fuel, electricity, water, food. Take your pick. These are all things that Hamas leadership in particular has been shown repeatedly to be stealing from the Palestinian people.